Sayın Başkanım, nasılsınız? Sessizdesiniz.
Vallahi sesimi kestiniz. Sizin gibi böyle değerli hocalarımız, Çağrı hocam orada, siz oradasınız. Bessan hocam orada. Bizim nasıl konuşalım hocam? Biz dinliyoruz sizleri.
Estağfurullah hocam, biz sizin için buradayız.
Sağ olun. Çok teşekkür ediyorum. Lütfettiniz, onur verdiniz bu etkinliğe katıldığınızdan dolayı.
The gentleman I'm speaking to, Mr. Mustafa Aydın, is the chairman of the university. I just want to introduce him. Richard Bey üst tarafta, Basan Barandi, eski Suriyeli bir diplomat beyefendi. Katolik Üniversitesi'nin profesörü Herbert Regenbogen var. Richard Bey de eski albay, right?
Albay, evet. Emekli albay.
Emekli albay. I know you speak a little Turkish. Actually, I heard it's pretty good.
Very good Turkish.
Derdimi anlatacak kadar Türkçem var.
And the always on time Ali Çınar. You're on mute right now.
Okay. Herkese selamlar Sayın Başkanım. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Ali Bey merhabalar. Hayırlı günler diliyorum.
Çağrı Hocam, Bassam.
Merhaba,
hocam.
merhaba.
We're gonna Chairman Aydın's gonna give a brief opening statement.
Okay. Who is
And
next?
then I'm
just
gonna give a very short
Let's get
explainer
to
into
more.
it. I want to get right into it. I know everyone has busy
Faisal, go ahead.
schedules, so I'm hoping to keep this going about 90 minutes. I don't want to go too long. Give everyone two rounds of questions. Sayın Başkanım, başlayalım mı yavaştan?
Ali Çınar Bey biraz galiba Yusuf Hocam. Onu bir uyaralım müsaade ederseniz çünkü ses karışacak birbirine.
Okay.
Okay. Peki ben öncelikle ben bütün hocalarıma saygılarımı sunuyorum, bütün katılımcılarımıza. I speak Turkish language and I want to my colleague İrem Hanım she translation from Turkish language to English language. Öncelikle bir yoldan mola verdik Yusuf Hocam. Bu pilotaj okuluyla alakalı Çağrı Hocam bizim işbirliği yaptığımız okulun pistleri Dalaman'daydı. Dalaman ve Efes'te onları incelemek için bugün buraya geldik. Tam bu saatte oldu. Şimdi böyle bir ara verdik. Buradan konuşuyorum. Onun için böyle zaman zaman belki kesinti olursa öncelikle ben bunun için şimdiden bütün katılımcılardan ve hocalarımdan özür diliyorum.
Estağfurullah, hayırlı olsun inşallah.
İrem Hanım.
Başkanım siz konuşun.
Okey. Bu tabii bütün hocalarımız zaten biliyorlar. Pandemi sürecinde bütün üniversitelerimiz farklı konularda sosyal, ekonomik, siyasi, askeri değişik konularda hem üniversitelerin naturasını canlı tutmak hem üniversitelerin asli görevi olan toplumu bilgilendirme görevini yerine getirmek için süreci online webinarlarla sürdürdüler. Bu maksatla da İstanbul Aydın Üniversitesi çok farklı alanlarda belki 500'ün üzerinde webinarlar yaptık. Bunların bir bölümünü de özellikle Rakip Kutay hocamızın, o da birazdan dahil olacak, İstanbul Aydın Üniversitesi Enstitüler Başkanlığını yürüten Profesör Doktor Rakip Kutay hocamızın başkanlığında çok önemli webinarlar dizisi gerçekleştirdik. Bunların bir tanesi Doğu Akdeniz'deki yaşanan bu güncel gelişmeleri konu almıştı. Bir diğeri Çin Kuşak Yol projesini konu almıştı. Üçüncüsü Biden döneminde Türk-Amerikan ilişkilerini masaya yatırmıştık. Ve daha sonra da Güney Kafkasya'yı en son olarak özellikle Azerbaycan ile Ermenistan arasında olan savaşı konu alan webinarlar yaparak çalışmalarımızı sürdürmüştük. Bugün de özellikle...
Sayın Başkanım, izninizle sizin dediklerinizi İngilizce duymak adına bir duyuru yapmak istiyorum. For all those listening to Chairman Aydın speak, if you want to hear the English version, there's an interpretation button on the very bottom. And if you tap on the interpretation button, you can hear the English language version of his opening statement. Sayın Başkanım.
Peki. Şu anda bir problem var mı Yusuf Hocam? Devam ediyor muyuz?
Yok, problem devam
Peki.
ediyor.
Son olarak da bu webinarlarımızın bugün yaptığımızda özellikle bu son gelişmeler ışığında Türk-Amerikan ilişkilerinin geleceği ne olacak başlığı ile siz değerli hocalarımızın katılımıyla ve değerli katılımcılarımızla beraber bugün bunu değerlendireceğiz. Tabii bütün katılımcılarımızın bildiğimiz gibi 18. yüzyıldan itibaren Türk-Amerikan ilişkileri ve özellikle de İkinci Dünya Savaşı ile beraber hızla genişlemiş. NATO ile beraber de gerçekten bu ilişkiler zirveye taşımıştır diyebiliriz. Süreç içerisinde zaman zaman inişli çıkışlı olmakla beraber hiçbir zaman diyebiliriz ki Kıbrıs 1974 Kıbrıs Harekatı dahil olmak üzere bugünkü kadar gerildiğini, bugünkü kadar tarafların birbirini söylemekte birazcık imtina ediyorum ama hasımane olacak şekilde nitelendirdikleri bir dönem hiç olmamıştı. Özellikle son Suriye, Libya, Irak'ta yaşanan gelişmeler, PKK ve PYD'ye Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nin ve Türkiye'nin çok farklı açılardan bakması, FETÖ liderinin Amerika'da hala ikamet ediyor olması, S-4 füzelerinin durumu, buna bağlı olarak F-35 projesinde Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nin Türkiye'yi bu projeden çıkarması ve en son olarak da hepimizi gerçekten derinden yaralayan ve Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Devleti'nin siyasi olarak, halk olarak Ermeni soykırımını Biden'ın tanıması veya bunu zikretmesi Amerika Birleşik Devletleri ile Türkiye ilişkilerini az önce de ifade ettiğim gibi hasmane nitelendirecek bir duruma gelmiştir. Benim kanaatimce şartların buraya gelmesinde tek tarafı ben suçlu görmüyorum. Yani her iki tarafın da bu ilişkilerin bu denli sıkıntılı bir hale gelmesinde hepsinin katkısı olduğunu değerlendiriyorum ben. Öyle veya böyle. Bugün de siz değerli hocalarımızın değerlendirmeleriyle konuyu masaya yatırmak suretiyle hem coğrafyada hem dünyada olmaz iki ülkenin muhakkak ki bir işbirliği içerisinde, muhakkak ki birbirine dayanışma içerisinde olması gerçeğinden hareket ederek bundan sonra nasıl bir yol izlemelerini, ne yaparsalar bu hasımane tutumunun dostaneye dönüştürüleceğini siz değerli hocalarımızın yaklaşımlarıyla, değerlendirmeleriyle bugün hep beraber onu inşallah dinleyeceğiz sizlerden. Ben bu vesileyle öncelikle bu webinarı düzenleyen ve bu webinarlar dizisini hala da devam ettirecek olan üniversitemizin enstitüleri başkanı olan Profesör Doktor Rakip Buday hocamıza çok teşekkür ediyorum. Ve müteakiben Çağrı hocama, benim çok yakın dostum, arkadaşım, birçok platformda beraber çalıştığımız Altınbaş Üniversitemizin rektörü Profesör Doktor Çağrı Erhan hocamıza, Yusuf Erim çok değerli dostumuz, bu webinarlarda bizleri yalnız bırakmıyor, Yusuf Erim hocamıza, Amerika'dan yine İstanbul Aydın Üniversitesi'nin öğretim görevlilerinden olan Ali Çınar hocamıza, Bessam Verbadani değerli dostumuza, aynı şekilde Richard Kutsin hocamıza, Herbert Reisenbegin'e bu katkılarından dolayı bizlere bu webinarda eşlik ederek hem toplumu aydınlatması hem de iki ülkenin ilişkilerinin daha dostane bir hale dönüşmesi için katkı sağlayacaklarından dolayı ben insanlık adına hem ülkemiz adına hem Amerika Birleşik Devletleri adına ben şükranlarımı arz etmek istiyorum. Hepinize çok teşekkür ediyorum katılımınızdan dolayı. Onur verdiniz, şeref verdiniz diyorum. Hayırlı bir webinar olsun diyorum. Koronasız günler dilekleriyle hepinize sağlıklı günler diliyorum. Hayırlı günler diliyorum efendim.
Thank you, Mustafa Aydın, for those wonderful opening remarks. Very, very sincere comments. And thank you to Istanbul Aydın University for providing this platform where we can all get together and talk about the U.S.-Turkey relationship and how it's being impacted by recent developments. Now, when we look at the developments going on between the U.S. and Turkey and what factors, what variables are impacting this relationship, we see that on January 20th, there was a new administration sworn in under Joe Biden. And of course, following the change in U.S. leadership, a change in policy, more a pivot to Asia going on right now, that we're seeing changes in the way America views the Syria policy. Also, we're seeing on April 24th, Joe Biden used the word genocide when describing the events of 1915. as well. Also, as former President Donald Trump was leaving, we see CAATSA sanctions being imposed on Turkey because of purchase of the S-400 Russian air defense missile system as well. So there's a lot going on right now in the U.S.-Turkey relationship. It's a very fluid situation. So to unpack this, what's going on in the relationship, we've got very, very distinguished and honorable panelists today. And I want to open the floor first with Çağrı Aydın. He's the rector, the dean of Altınbaş University. And Çağrı Bey, I just want to ask you right now, can you give us a summary exactly of what's going on in your views of where the U.S.-Turkey relationship is?
Okay, we had better times in the past, and I think we will have worse times in the future. I am not optimistic in this sense. Everything is getting worse and worse day by day, and the number of problems on the table is increasing. Now, I can count maybe 3 times more problems on the table when compared to areas of cooperation between the Turkish and American relations. We have a 200 years old past. Turkish-American relations had started late 18th century, not after the Second World War, during the Ottoman times. And when we look back to the past, we didn't see such a dark era in this bilateral relations. Now, we have a lot of problems, as I said, on the table. The problem about US support to PKK in northern Syria, the US hosting of FETÖ leader, Gülenist terrorist organization leader in United States, in Pennsylvania, the Turkish purchase of S-400s from Russia, Turkish kicking out of F-35 project, the CAATSA sanctions, and finally the Armenian genocide issue. And there are many more issues like Halkbank case, which is ongoing case, and the increasing anti-Erdoganism in the United States. As all the participants here know, the United States decision-making process does not solely depend on the administration. We are also, we have the Congress itself, and we have the interest groups and lobbies. So the decision towards a third party or a foreign country is somehow a mixture or combination of these 3 powers: the administration, the Congress, and they are directly influenced by these interest groups and the lobbies. Never in the past, we didn't see such a negative approach of these 3 important components of US foreign policy decision-making process. Administration is negative to Turkey, Congress itself is negative to Turkey, and we don't have any friends of Turkey in Washington, D.C. All the lobbies, particularly the Armenian, the Greek, and the Jewish, and of course FETÖ and PKK Kurdish, all the lobbies are against Turkey. And all the interest groups are against Turkey, including the weapons lobby, arms lobby, quite important previously between Turkey and the United States. Therefore, it is, for me, it is very unlikely that we can solve these problems on the table. But at the end, these 2 countries are allied countries under the umbrella of NATO. And we have some strategic common interests in some areas like Eastern Mediterranean, in Northern Africa, in Afghanistan, in the Middle East. Of course, we will come together on the table, and we hope, I say we hope because there are some rumors, we hope that the presidents of 2 countries will come together in the margins of Brussels NATO summit. It can be canceled, we don't know. I think Ali will give more clear and up-to-date information about this issue. But at the end, this strategic cooperation will continue. But when it comes to cooperation in all areas, I think it is impossible because on both in Washington side and in Ankara. There are mutual suspicions to each other, and these suspicions I cannot compare it to any time in the past. Not even during the Johnson's letter era in 1964, not even to arms embargo period of 1978 or 74-78, or not even to the series of Armenian allegations in 1980s. It is quite different. There's a huge, gigantic anti-Erdogan mood in Ankara, in Washington. So if Biden administration wants to take some steps forward with Turkey, and I think as an international relations expert, I think they need to do this, then first they have to erase these anti-Erdogan and anti-Turkish sentiments in Washington. Without it, we cannot go forward. Why, just final sentence, why I think United States needs Turkey in the area? Because now there's a rising China. China is making very realistic and very clever steps in our region. They made an agreement with Pakistan. Now they have a huge harbor in Indian Ocean. Just 2 weeks ago, they made a deal with who? Iran. Huge deal, the biggest in maybe 2 decades. $200 billion deal with Iran. In turn, they got another port in Hormuz Strait, in Persian Gulf. So China is approaching to the Middle East. China is approaching to Eastern Africa. China is approaching to Eastern Mediterranean. So this is the final, maybe the final long walk of China, the final step of final phase of their long walk towards the West. So if you want to, if the United States want to compete with China, or if United States want to delay Chinese superpowership, then United States needs concrete allies in the region, strong allies in the region, and no need to search for another one. Turkey is there. So cooperating with Turkey will directly help US policies in the area in order to block Chinese penetration to the Middle East, Northern Africa, and Eastern Africa region. But if US doesn't see any Chinese threats in the region, of course, they can do whatever they want. Then Turkey will be forced to choose its way. And this way, most probably, will not be a bipartisan or neutral situation. Everything will change. Turkish change of direction would influence US policies in the region more than any country in the region. So I believe both countries, both Turkey and US, needs for a healthy renewal and treatment of the relations, mutual relations. Otherwise, both countries will lose in this area. Thank you.
That was Çağrı Erhan, Rector, President of Altenbaş University. Thank you very much for your comments. Now, I want to move to Herbert Regenbogen. And one of the things that President Erhan was talking about, he was complaining about the lobbies in the United States being against Turkey. He was talking about the negative image created, the negative aura surrounding Turkey, not only at the White House, but also Congress and amongst special interest groups. Herbert, how do you view Turkey's image right now? How did it get to this point? And how do you think Turkey can fix its image in the United States?
Well, it's not only a question about the image of how Turkey is perceived, it's how Turkey perceives itself. So what the Biden administration puts forward is a watershed of not walking away any longer from taboos. It is a time where the framing for the dialogue is not about strategic partners, but not about friends, but about lovers. That's an extreme different understanding. It's about values. It's about the commonality of joining together, which resists authoritarian, non-liberal worldviews. And if there's anything about China and Russia, it is exactly that context. So that the world today is looking for allies that are supportive of democracy. And it begins right there, that when leaders, regardless if it's Turkey, or if it's Poland, if it's Hungary, if it's the Czech Republic, all NATO members, there's question marks that are rising with this watershed with the Biden administration. So when you talk about interest lobbies, okay, but when you refer it as if an innuendo that this is a Jewish conspiracy, if you think that you call out criticism against Israel or any other issue, that has justified. But when you allude to some kind of prejudice, and that may be in terms of criticizing the Israelis for attacking Palestine with the civil killings, civilians, which is justified. There are lobbies that press and want to make this more than what it is. But in itself, it's very dramatic. So the images, the control of communication is important in terms of containing a fallout of discredibility. So Turkey has very few friends, except for the two right here and the others. So the friendship we have is here. It's not just artificial. But we need to understand, why are we having these bumps in the road? And these issues begin with our not talking side by side, but directly with each other. Yes, it's been called and labeled an Armenian genocide. The liabilities are not the same in the courts. This is not about Congress. This is not about some interest groups. This is not about the administration or other entities. It's about the courts and the liabilities that Turkey could lose assets in America. So to make it plain, there are very serious changes in previous litigation issues facing any country in terms of taking away property. And this happened 8 weeks ago, 9-0 in the Supreme Court, in the case of the Federal Republic of Germany versus the Philippines. What it says in quintessence is that not everybody can rush to an American court if they think that the property has been taken away by their government. And it says very clearly, if you're a citizen, you're not going to find any jurisdiction here. And what it's going to say is that if you're a non-citizen and this happened to you, okay, now you have. So a lot has changed in terms of the risks that Turkey faces in these kind of issues. Again, who's talking about this? Who's understanding the containment of the risks that are facing Turkey and the liabilities that are enshrined in this overburdened use of media to shadow the images of each other? It's important as friends, as people who share a deep commitment of family traditions, who respects religion, who really wants to get into having a family of work as NATO members, and as you're aspiring to work with the West, traditionally since Ataturk, and not reversing to other types of political innuendos, again, a decision that Turkey's leadership will have to make. But when it makes those decisions to go and become a regional hegemon, then they are going to be asked, are they really supportive of the Western interests, or they are playing off each other's interests? East versus West and West versus East.
Professor Regenbogen, one question. How politically motivated was President Biden's use of the term genocide on April 24th? How much of it was based on historical knowledge, maybe that he might have accrued from his advisors? How much of it was based on lobby pressure? And how much of it was just to please certain constituents, in your view?
I think that the general academic public and the general political representatives on the Hill and in the Democratic Party, among the progressives, have all concurred that this is called to be labeled an Armenian genocide. Now, again, just to go back to the first question, how do you contain and control these kind of solicitations, such labeling? The Swiss did this as well in the 1990s. They financed an international historical commission, which Turkey can do too. Open up all your archives by law, private and public, and make sure this is enforced so that you can create the international commission of experts from deniers and supporters and in between. And after 5 years, like in Switzerland, you will have results.
But Turkey has called for an international commission, and Turkey is opening its archives, as far as I'm aware of.
But it's not law, and it's not private and public. So you need to look again. It is the seriousness of these historical comparisons by law, not just by policy, by law, by looking very seriously. What did the Swiss do? This is a model which it really sustained, changing the image of Switzerland for themselves and for people perceiving Switzerland. And this was all about litigation in American courts. So again, it has very much to do with how you control the information, the public relations, and develop a commitment that you are seeking justice. It's not about truth, it's about justice. Because nobody is going to have absolute truth in these matters about the historical past.
I always feel it's a very slippery slope when politicians start legislating history, especially when we have valuable academics like we do right now on this panel, where they should be studying these archives and they should be the ones talking and determining how history is written. But let's move on. I want to move on to former retired Colonel Richard Utzon. He's a private consultant as well. Now there's a NATO summit coming up very, very soon. And in the buildup to this summit, we've seen tensions between Russia and Ukraine, China, a growing power, increasing threat perception in the eyes of the US, Turkey playing a very important role in the region, shedding its skin, becoming a regional power, having an impact on what happens on the ground, not only in Iraq, but Syria, Eastern Mediterranean, Libya, areas of American interest. Now, how do you see the Turkey-US relationship playing out at this NATO summit, Turkey's relationship with NATO also, and a possible face-to-face between US President Joe Biden and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan? You're on mute, sir.
Sorry, önceden teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Kendinize, Sayın Başkan Mustafa Aydın'a ve İstanbul Aydın Üniversitesi'ne bu güzel fırsat için ve her zaman bu değerli meslektaşlarımla beraber sohbet etmek ve bu önemli konuları hitap etmek çok önemli bir fırsattır. Onun için teşekkürler. On the question of NATO, Turkey won't leave NATO, and NATO doesn't want Turkey out. There's no mechanism for them to be out, and Turkey continues, as you have noted, to offer an extension of NATO's reach into many, many areas that are conflict areas today. I have a piece coming out for the Washington Institute, probably the end of next month. It's in editing now, about Turkish power projection. People throw around terms like hegemony, neo-Ottomanism, etc., but what it is rational regional politics. Turkey, over the last 20 years, has taken note at the level of strategy elites, that's both in government and out, that the West has not protected Turkish interests, and frankly, NATO has not protected Turkish interests in Turkey's own direct neighborhood. And in a second, I'll get to why I think that is. But the important thing is Turkey has developed a more extensive diplomatic network. It's, I think, tripled the number of diplomatic representations in Africa and tripled its diplomatic budget. It is sextupled its economic investment and trade volume with Africa. It has developed relationships of trust with Ukraine, with Azerbaijan, with Malaysia, many other countries. People in the United States sometimes think Turkey is isolated or more fragile than it was, I don't know, say in the 1990s or the 2000s, and that's simply not the case. Empirically, Turkey has greater reach and influence now. And it's ironic at a time when the United States has more or less come to the conclusion it can't organize the Near East, the Middle East or Eastern Europe on its own, doesn't want to be the sole superpower hegemon, that having a partner who is more often aligned than not on global strategic issues with growing power, that this is a time of strategic alienation. It's an irony, and it's something that we should pay attention to. But as to whether the upcoming summit will be an opportunity to fix that, I don't think it will. My understanding is that there has been a request for a bilateral meeting. My understanding from the press is that President Erdogan will ask for some sort of step backwards from President Biden on the Armenian resolution. And if that's the case, I think it's going to be met with a negative answer. So to the extent that it's focused on current problems, most of which are at an impasse, I don't think that this will be the beginning of a new positive era. I will have to agree with Çağrı Hocam in this regard. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. So it's worse than it has been in the past and not as bad as it will be to come. I will disagree with Çağrı Hocam on the point about Washington, though. Turkey is not entirely without friends. And there are people in each of the institutions that are important that still want to see an improvement in relations. And that provides hope for the future. Now, I wanted to make a point about historical context here. And basically, I think that the US-Turkish relations in the period of the Cumhuriyet, the Republic, have followed a roughly cyclical pattern. And that pattern is indexed to perceptions in the United States and in Turkey of US regional power. When the US is perceived internationally as ascendant, as it was in the 1920s, the 1950s, and the 1990s, Turkey has pursued close relations, and the US has favored closer cooperation as long as interests seem aligned. Now, during these times, the US still hasn't conceded anything important to Turkey where our interests diverge. And over time, that failure to be attuned to Turkish sensitivities leads to hedging behavior on the part of Turkey. So after these periods of convergence, we see in the 1930s, the 1960s, and the 2000s, greater Turkish openness to cooperation with non-Western powers. And this in turn leads to sort of a period of friction and tension, and then serious crisis, and like we saw in the 1940s, the 1970s, and the 2010s. So normally what happens in this cycle is there's a cataclysmic event. So the first cycle was more or less ended by the Second World War. The second cycle was ended by sort of everything that happened in both countries at the end of the 1960s and 1970s. US pull out of Vietnam, Soviets in Afghanistan, destabilization in Turkey, and both countries came to realize the need for reconvergence. What happened at the end of the third cycle was different, though, because that's the period of the US invasion of Iraq. And there has been a series of crises, none of them cataclysmic to either country, but certainly there has not been a convergence either. So in a sense that this paradigm of cyclical sort of divergence and then reconvergence may be at an end. There's 5 reasons I think that's so. The first is that the United States has become invested and entrenched in Turkey's immediate neighborhood in ways that are directly antithetical to Turkish interests, which never was the case before, and shows no signs of lessening those investments. During the Cold War, the Americans would occasionally undercut Turkish interests in an ephemeral way, but not in a direct and a sustained way. So US actions in Iran and Lebanon in the 1950s were ephemeral, and our response to Greek action in Cyprus in the 1960s and 1970s was reactive. So it's always either ephemeral or reactive. But Iraq 2003 was different. it was sort of an earthquake in that we did something that was purposeful, antithetical to Turkish interests, and with long-term effects. And we did that despite Turkey saying this is not going to be what you think it is. So, over time, Turkey adjusted to an extent to the fall of Saddam and the close U.S. sustained relationship with the Kurds of Iraq and the Kurdistan Regional Government, and developed its own successful symbiosis with Erbil. But at the end of that decade, 2010, 11, 12, 13, when we made investment in the YPG, which is the PKK movement's Syrian franchise, that went well beyond Turkish red lines in a way that is unprecedented in the relationship. And as you've mentioned, the residence of Fethullah Gulen in Pennsylvania also means that the leader of an anti-Turkish network now conducts his business in peace in the United States. We'll leave the discussion for another time about how he came to have such influence in Turkey that that he could even try to overthrow the government. But suffice it to say that his continued residence in the United States now is a structural element of tension. In the Eastern Mediterranean, there are signs that the United States is building third-party capabilities that are or could be directed against Turkey, such as massive military deals with Greece and the Emirates, not to mention the YPG in Syria. So the US has gone from a distant and occasionally disruptive ally to approximately and persistently threatening ally. That's one issue. The second is the loss of institutional investment in Turkey by the American defense and foreign policy bureaucracy. During the Cold War and through 2001 or so, and this is when I came to know Turkey for the first time, the occasional frictions were buffered by the presence of thousands of Americans who had served in Turkey, often with their families, and developed a certain familiarity with and sympathy for Turkey, or at least for Turkey's strategic weight and national will. The military presence has gone down greatly in recent decades, and there's a new generation of leaders of the American military who see Turkey as a problem set rather than as an ally. There's also fewer and fewer historians and public intellectuals to do what Bernard Lewis did in the 1970s and 1980s by contextualizing Turkey in a balanced light for the expert and general reading audiences. The defense industry has evaporated those ties, as you mentioned earlier, as well. And then Çağrı Hoca talked about the congressional problems in the post-tutelary period. So after the rise of the AKP, it's just become too confusing for most Americans, and it's frustrating for the Washington policy elites. Turkey's defenders, even in the State Department, are few in number. So it's hard to find voices arguing that the US should seek to reinitiate convergence, although there are some. A third point, and I'll try to hurry these last couple points to get on to the next speaker, but Russia has adapted. This is important. Why? Because the entire cycle that I discussed in the 20th century was fed by Soviet threat that was shared by both the United States and by Turkey. But Russia has adapted to NATO. It's not that Russia has stopped seeing NATO as a threat, but Russia, after the turn of the century, reconstituted its capabilities and shifted efforts against NATO as they adapted to their own weakness. NATO was an alliance with strategic unity and common purpose against a shared conventional and nuclear threat and against a radical revisionist ideology in a core area. That's how it was since the end of the World War II, the beginning of the alliance in the 1950s. So Russia in the 21st century dropped the massive conventional threat and nuclear saber rattling and the radical ideology and the focus on Central Europe, and instead became a hybrid autocracy, a hybrid military threat, including a heavy cyber development, and a unique political brand that appeals to certain elements within Europe and NATO, and even within Turkey. They've pursued extensive business and banking ties with Western and non-Western countries, practiced a no judgment power politics form of power projection, and generally played done a very good job of playing a weak hand well. So the glue that held NATO together, including Turkey and the United States, which was the bear in the East, has learned not to cast a very big shadow, except for when it really means to. Finally, I'll say that the US relative strength in the region has declined, and Turkey's relative strength in the region has increased, but the US strategic community hasn't caught up to that reality. There's still a tendency in Washington to see Turkey as very weak, very isolated, and therefore very subject to our coercive steps. Look, politics in the United States are strange now. And I just want to comment on the Armenian genocide terminology. If you're paying attention to the United States internal political dialogue, we're also calling our own country racist and genocidal and fundamentally flawed, right? So this is a period of great questioning. It's not only Turkey. Don't take it as a personal iftira I would say, to Turkey, because at this particular time, we're sort of being very historically critical of ourselves as well as a number of our allies. Look, these structural changes mean the same cycle is no longer operating. What I think we are in now is a new period that I call co-optertainment. It's a combination of co-optation, cooperation, and containment. The United States cannot get around the third of those, the first of those, which is co-optation. We need Turkey for certain things, and we will try to co-opt or use Turkey for our own purposes. Turkey will also do that with us. The second part is cooperation, where we still do cooperate, especially on a multilateral level in many places, including Afghanistan. And the third is containment. The United States does feel, to some extent, I think, concerned about Turkey's rising strength in the region. It's going to have to get used to that because it's not something that the United States can reverse, but we haven't caught up yet. So I'd say this is going to be a measured period for the next 10 to 15 years where we are both still formal allies within NATO and still seek opportunities to cooperate, but really are engaged in a sort of competition, an uneasy competition with one another, and managing that and finding, just enough cooperative opportunities. So it's 51% cooperation and 49% co-optation or containment. That will be the key to a successful relationship. And I suppose you can thus mark me down, along with Çağrı Hocam, as a sort of a pessimist in what the next decade will look like.
Well, it does look like America is having problems adjusting and reformulating some of its strategies to take into account the new multipolar reality. Now we're seeing Turkey talking about it, independent foreign policy. We're seeing it hedge its foreign policy bets, diversify its foreign policy portfolio, increasing its relations with Beijing, with Moscow, and other important capitals as well. We're seeing Europe talk about strategic autonomy. So there is this wave of diversifying the foreign policy portfolio to be able to benefit from relations with the East that was unprecedented 10 to 20 years ago when many of these US foreign policies were formulated. Now, Richard touched upon Syria a lot, and who better to talk about Syria than Bassam Barandi, former Syrian diplomat. Now, when we look at the US and Turkey in Syria, we see cooperation in Western Syria and Idlib. We see both countries trying to keep migrant flows inside Syria, trying to establish some form of stability. But in Northeast Syria, we see both countries going head to head with different threat perceptions, especially regarding the YPG, the People's Protection Unit, a group that Turkey views as a terrorist threat, and a group that the United States views as the majority of the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is America's coalition partner in the fight against ISIS. So hugely vast different views. There's also a Russian reality in this region. We saw an American withdrawal of troops about a year and a half ago under former US President Donald Trump. What could have been a US-Turkey handover in that region ended up turning into a Russian land grab, complicating the situation on the ground, not only for Turkey, also for the United States as well, giving the regime much more power. Bassam, there's a new administration in Washington. Turkey still very interested in what's going on in Syria. What can we expect going forward?
Thank you again for having me. I will try to answer a lot of points the previous professors, doctors, they mentioned to reach out to Syria, because it's all accumulated process. We cannot separate things from each other. The US-Turkish relation wasn't bad because of Biden administration. The relation started to be moving to negative direction in the last, I think, 2 years from Obama administration. Remember the military coup against the president, then we have membership agreement, that all was during Obama administration. And from that time on, things start to move in a negative way. During President Trump time, the personal relation between President Erdogan and President Trump, maybe it saved Turkey and gained Turkey sometimes, but the whole establishment in the United States, they were not happy with that kind of personal relation. So when this administration came, it was accumulative things. With this administration, Biden administration, we should not forget ever that they have too much influence of leftist Democrats who believes in too much human rights. They believe too much in in giving the people rights for governing themselves. And from here, I think the genocide being used from this administration to satisfy that ratio of people who are literally big supporter of Biden, rather than Biden or the administration itself. So this part of, we should understand it. The same things that push us to understand how this administration with Gaza things. This is the first time the Americans say two-state solution, Israel should stop. That explain to us what's going on now in the Congress, that the first time in the history of the United States, member of Democratic Party say United States should not sell weapons to Israel. I mean, this is all goes in the same line, same thing. It's not about Turkey, it's about the whole movement of thinking is the United States, and we should take it very seriously because this will not stop here. That goes aligned with exactly what everybody knows, that United States is moving from the Middle East toward China, and they want to finish this Middle East. And here I think the key point for Turkey, we should remember and reach, and the professors, they know much better than me, the Americans, they don't care about history. So when we start any conversation with the American that we have 200 years of relation, for any current American officials, that doesn't mean for him anything. They always think, what can you do for us today and tomorrow? It's not about yesterday. Yesterday is gone. We appreciate it, but it has nothing to do much in our calculation. So moving forward, I think we have something very important going on in the Middle East now. It's the new nuclear deal with the United States. Most of the Arab countries, they fear that the United States will sell us again. I will come here to Syria, that we will be sold again. All the GCC countries, they are really shaking because of that new deal, because that will give Iranian, or the perception that Iranian has hegemony. Literally this time will have the control of the Middle East. And there's no way out. Some countries, the Arab countries, they have to reach agreement with Israel, hoping that Israel will protect them, give them more leverage in Washington. Again, Gaza war shows that this is nothing to build on. And that leaves Turkey to come in. So Turkey, I believe they should not much think what can they do with the United States, because as Professor Scher, he mentioned a lot of sophisticated problems between the two countries that unsolvable in the short term. It's not about personal, it's become more technical problems. It's not any more political problems. So, and reaching more to China and Russia will not help Turkey to improve its image or policy or interest in Washington. So I think Turkey should think about different dimensions in reaching out to the world. And here what I believe, that Turkey should reach more to Saudi Arabia and to Egypt. So there should be this triangle, Turkey, Saudi, Egyptian, and that will protect these countries, GCC and Egypt and Turkey, from Iran, the coming Iran nuclear. It should show that there's some kind of stability in the region. There's some countries like Turkey is a NATO, it's 80 million people, they have GDP is very high, and they should reach out. And the problem with Arab world, with the Turkey, they perceive Turkey is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think Turkey should make sure that this is politics, this is not Muslim Brotherhood supporter. And this we come to Syria. So the same people who work in Manbij, they are now dealing with Syria. So I don't think they will have different perspective concerning PKK, YPG. Rather than, I think they will try to protect them in a way, and taking some Turkish consideration of security in this regard. So I don't see there will be giving up on them. But again, here for Turkey, when they talk about PKK, they know, everybody knows this is very important, essential national security threat for Turkey, that Turkey will never give up on it, no matter what. And that gives Turkey more leverage on the Americans to say, guys, if you want to do something in Northeast Syria, this is our condition, which is, I think, I know it from 2016, the Turks told the Americans that we have no problem to have a KRG model in Northeast Syria, as long as that fit our narratives both together. At that time, the Americans said, we are busy encountering ISIS. We don't want to distract YPG in politics. Today, there's opportunity for United States and Turkey to work on the whole Syria cases. I don't think it's any interest of any regional country, not even to Syria, to keep 3 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. These people, they should come back home. They should not stay in Turkey. They should not go to Europe. They should back home. We have very dangerous trend in the Middle East now, or the Levant right now. I say dangerous because it could be changing the dynamics of the Middle East. What we see like PKK, they are Kurdish extremist terrorist movement. They are hijacking all the Kurdish movement, peaceful movement, or the normal streets, and they are taking the lead on that. Then we have HTS in Idlib. They are Sunni extremist Arab movement that are hijacking whole Idlib, and they say we represent these people. Then we see Hezbollah, extremist Shia terrorist group who's hijacking the whole Shia, and they say we are representing them. And we see Bashar al-Assad who hijacking the whole Alawites, and say we are losing the country in the state of legal status of the country. The center of powers is not anymore in the country centers. Turkey can help this nation to build the nation. Syria today is not a nation, is not a country. It's I don't know, it's militia divided among sphere state of many countries. Nobody trusts Russia, nobody trusts the Iranian. Americans are not interested, and when they are interested, they support the Kurds, they don't support the rest of the Syrian. So Turkey has a major role to play, and it has to play it, and everybody will listen. So I really should take initiatives rather than just waiting what other countries are doing. Dividing Syria the way it's divided and allowing more radical groups to represent the population, like Hezbollah, PKK, Assad, is HTS in Idlib, that will not be in interest of Turkey or stability in the region for 5-6 years. And that will be not in favor of Turkish national security in 5 years. Americans are not interested. They will not spend much energy, time in the Middle East or in Syria anymore. They just want to leave as fast as they can. Iran is taking they hope to fill the vacuum. Everybody hates Iran. Nobody trusts Iran. Their atrocity in Syria is very clear, in Yemen, in Lebanon. So there's no way to defend Iran. And here where I think Turkey can jump in, regardless what the Americans think, and fill that gap. The more Turkey have coherent process and policy with these Arab countries, the more it has strong position toward the NATO, toward the United States, toward the EU. So this is what I hope to see in Turkey in the coming 2-3 years, or maybe shorter, because Iran deal is very much in the coming weeks. Syria, I think, is a hopeless case at this time. Nobody is interested to solve the case of Syria. I don't see there's any political solution coming soon. There's no energy for that. And that make everybody is in limbo. What the Syrian people can do. Again, I don't think the 3 million Syrian in Turkey, they should stay in Turkey. They should back home. I mean, the home is there. It's just across the border, the home is there. The problem is Turkey, Russian regime, Russian Assad and Iran. So the more Turkey try to bring the refugees back to Syria and kick out or limited the movement of HTS, I think they will have leverage in the West without reaching up to the West. I think this is what I hope to see, and this is what I promote even with the Turkish officials. Thank you,
Bassam. Bassam Barandi, former Syrian diplomat. Now, my next question is to Ali Çınar. He's chairman of Turkish Heritage Organization, Washington-based think tank. Now, one of the things that Bassam said that was very interesting is when you sit at the table with the Americans, they don't care about what you did in the past. They'll say, we appreciate it. They say, what can you do for me today? What can you do for me tomorrow? What can Turkey do for the U.S. today and tomorrow? And what can the U.S. do for Turkey today and tomorrow? What's the future of the relationship? Where is this going?
Thank you, Yusuf, and thanks for Istanbul Aydın University. I'm very proud of part of the Istanbul Aydın University as a lecturer since 2019. Before I start, actually, I want to focus on President Biden and his view on Turkey, because President Biden is a leader who knows Turkey well, with him having visited Turkey 4 times during his vice presidency. And we also know him as a name who has met President Erdogan many times. And currently, the most important problem of Turkish-American relations is the trust issue. As you ask what Turkey should do and what United States should do, first, both NATO allies should resolve the trust issue. Unfortunately, 2 NATO allies still don't trust each other. While the US government has numerous foreign policy priorities, it turns into a government more focused on domestic policies. As we know, Biden administration is focusing on more COVID-19. So my point is, Turkey is not the priority for Biden administration because there's a perception everything is about Turkey in Washington, D.C. That's how the Turkish people or Turkish media focuses, but it's not. Washington, D.C. has more priorities than Turkey. Even we saw an Israeli-Hamas conflict, and Biden administration was stay away from Ankara and had a strong coordination with Egypt for ceasefire. So if the issue of trust between Ankara and Washington can be resolved, I believe that desire to solve the problems will present itself. Reservations of YPG, PKK, as 400, 535 issue, Syria, as Bassam highlighted on many different perspectives, human rights issue in Turkey are the main issues that come to mind. And President Biden's remarks against Turkey during his campaign period are the reasons for tension, one of the reasons I can say, as well as Turkey's close partnership with Russia. And President Biden, as we all know, called President Erdogan after 90 days for notifying his decision on so-called genocide. 90 days, the 2 NATO allies leaders have not spoken. So it's very obvious that Biden administration has a distance to Ankara and many reasons that why there's a distance from Washington, D.C. However, the multi-dimensional nature of Turkish-American relations should not be forgotten. Even though security is the backbone of the relationship for 2 NATO allies, joint opportunities for innovative collaborations in the field of trade, education, energy, technology are on both their agenda as well, especially on the trade volume. From the point of view of the United States, we see that in Congress, many Congress members sent letters against Turkey to White House administration, not just the current one, the previous administration, and which each passing day, negative Turkish perception increases in Washington, D.C., and anti-Turkish groups' common action plays a role in this matter. So the action to be taken here is to overcome the problem of trust and to initiate a clear dialogue. The good thing is Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman will be in Turkey end of the month, probably preparation for Biden and Erdogan meeting in June, and Wendy Sherman knows Turkey very well. And Richard also served in State Department and Pentagon. Many Obama officials, former officials, are currently working at the Biden administration, so they know Turkey very well. They know what will be Turkey's next step. So there will not be any learning curve for the Biden administration team, but at the same time, they know what Turkey would do with Russia, with Iran. So the dialogue and the trust, I think these 2 important items should be focused on the relationship. So solving problems within the NATO alliance as well, and Turkey working closely with the United States as it did in the past will be appropriate. As a Turkish-American, we would like to see Turkey and United States work closely on the defense partnership in the NATO alliance and establishing close relationship with the European Union, developing multi-dimensional relationship with the Asia-Pacific region. So Turkey will continue to be an important ally of United States. With that, unstable Turkey doesn't benefit from the strategic interests of United States or Europe, nor does it serve peace and stability in a region already devastated by volatility. Both United States and Turkey need one another, and they need to continue to work together to combat terror organizations that threaten not only Turkey, but other NATO allies, defeat Daesh, and resolve any other international disputes. So I don't want to say I'm pessimistic, but there are a lot of problems for two NATO allies, and hopefully Deputy Secretary Sharman meetings and after NATO allies leaders Erdogan and Biden's meeting, at least be honest and sincere to discuss the issues. Otherwise, Russians and Iranians will take more advantage to see the tension between Turkey and United States. So these upcoming months are very crucial for Turkey and United States, and hopefully we would see a good outcomes of these meetings. Thank you.
I wouldn't call those pessimistic comments. I would call them very realistic comments. And unfortunately, sometimes the reality of the US-Turkey relationship currently, especially with all that's going on in the world, does happen to grow a little pessimistic. I get pessimistic at times as well when I view the relationship. But fortunately, there are many safety nets, security nets, and many multilateral organizations that do lock in the relationship and allow for these bouts of strong winds to pass by. Now, I want to go one more round with all our guests before I close out. I want to go back to Çağrı Erhan, rector of Altenbaş University. I'm also going to ask the same question to Herbert Regenbogen afterwards as well. Now, we talked about the Armenian genocide in the first round. Now, I also want to talk about another very recent issue that Ali brought up as well, the Israel-Palestine issue, the Israeli attacks on Gaza, the tensions in Jerusalem as well. Turkey's stance in the international arena on this position, backing Palestine very, very strongly, criticizing Israel very, very heavily. The Biden administration stance, choosing to condemn Palestinian attacks while generally staying silent on what's going on the Israeli side as well. And this is obviously a very important international issue. It seems that we have a ceasefire at the moment. How long will that ceasefire hold? That remains to be seen. But a very important issue, especially for Turkey historically. Turkey's had a near 500-year relationship with the Jewish people predating the Jewish state of Israel since the Spanish Inquisition. Jews have been Ottoman citizens and have prospered inside the empire. Very strong relations with the Palestinians as well. Al-Aqsa Mosque, the first Qibla of Islam, the Qibla being the direction at which Muslims pray. So before Mecca, before Kaaba, there was Al-Aqsa Mosque, and Muslims used to face Al-Aqsa and pray. So very important religious significance from the mosque as well. So Çağrı Bey, how do you view the events in Jerusalem and the tensions in Gaza playing out in the US-Turkey relationship?
First of all, everything is mixed up.
I also want to add, how do you view this?
Intention.
I also want to add, how do you view this from an Israeli perspective, a Turkey-Israel relationship? Because it's hard to separate the US and Israel in the Middle East, being their very, very strong relationship. So I also want you to analyze this from a US-Israel, Turkey-Israel point of view also, please.
Everything is mixed up, as I said. The terms are just mixed with each other, and I think it is intentionally. First of all, there's nothing to do with religion for Turkish support in Palestine. When you look at the groups, political party groups at the Turkish parliament, there are secular groups, there are socialists, there are Kurdish party. All of these 5 parties, they just signed a declaration which is condemning Israel for their attacks in Gaza. And before AK Party coming to power, each and every Turkish government since 1960s, 1970s, they were with Palestinians. So what is the relation with AK Party's religious orientation and Turkish Palestinian policy? AK Party's Palestinian policy is just a continuation of 50 years of Turkish Republic's policy in Palestine issue. In 1970s, it was Bülent Ecevit who gave an embassy to Palestine Liberation Organization that time. You know Bülent Ecevit? Bülent Ecevit was just a central leftist politician in Turkey. And it was Kenan Evren Kenan Evren was the one who made a military coup in Turkey, was a general who closed down the Israeli embassy and who closed down Turkish embassy in Tel Aviv and even consulate general in Tel Aviv for condemning Israel for their occupation in Lebanon in 1982. So each and every government in Turkey has a specific Palestinian policy. AK Party is continuing this policy, and it depends on two-state solution. And it is nothing new. Two-state solution is a result of 1991 Madrid Peace Framework. Turkey is fully supporting it. And I think Turkey is the only country which is still supporting this 1991 Madrid Peace process and two-state solution. Wasn't it Obama who gave a chance to two-state solution? Is Biden supporting it now? But Turkey is supporting it. And Turkey is insisting on 1967 borders. Turkey is calling the parties a respect for United Nations Security Council resolutions of 242 and 338, which asks Israel withdraw from occupied Arab lands. What did the United States do in Trump's time? Trump officially, formally recognized the annexation of Arab land, the Golan Heights, by Israel. How come? It is directly against the United Nations Charter's principles. No country in modern times can go by military force and occupy another country's land. So how can United States be a country to solve the problem? Because they are supporting occupation of another country to another country's land. I'm not talking about Palestinians. I am talking about Syrian land, an independent country's land, which was an independent country since 1948 and a member of United Nations since that time. And Israel occupied and annexed Golan Heights. Now they are talking about annexing western part of Syria, West Bank, the Palestinian land. So there's a problem in this area, and Turkey is trying to bring the issue to international fora and take the attention of international community to the issue, because the Palestinians are quite alone nowadays and nobody is respecting to their international rights coming from international law. And of course, Turkish stance in this issue directly affects its position in the United States. Because as I mentioned in the first round, in the United States, Turkey had good relations with Jewish lobby in 1980s and 1990s. And Turkish governments used this Jewish lobby's power to balance the negative power of Greek and Armenian lobbies. However, when starting with, I think, 2008, particularly, when Ehud Olmert, the former premier of Israel, just broke his promise to Erdogan and attacked to Gaza in 2008-2009 winter, then everything has started to worsen. And Turkey started to be more active in Palestinian issue, openly condemned Israel, and then the support of Jewish lobby for Turkey in the United States started to diminish. And then they acted neutral for a while, but nowadays they are not only neutral, but they are, in many cases, are against Turkey. Without their support for Katsa, for instance, or so-called Armenian genocide issue, there wouldn't be this much higher approval to this anti-Turkish resolutions in the United States Congress. So, Jewish lobby directly involved against Turkey in these issues. Therefore, I think this is a dilemma. Turkey will continue to support Palestinians and will continue to condemn Israeli expansion and breach of international law in the area. And since Turkey will continue this approach, then the Israeli Jewish lobby in the United States will never come and support Turkish cause in the region. There were some possibilities for renewal of cooperation. For example, the Eastern Mediterranean gas and other hydrocarbon reserves could be act as a apparatus for renewal of Turkish-Israeli cooperation, particularly the transport of these hydrocarbon reserves to European markets. Turkey and United States, Turkey and Israel could cooperate in this issue. And for this end, everybody may recall, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlüt Çavuşoğlu invited Israeli Energy Minister to Antalya Diplomatic Forum. And all of us saw this an opportunity to restart some sort of soft contacts between Turkey and Israel. But all of a sudden, this Gaza attack started. And Turkey just withdrawn its invitation for Israeli energy minister. So there will be no face-to-face any kind of meeting between these two parties in near future. Therefore, the Netanyahu's or Israeli government's approach in a Palestinian issue is a key determinant of Turkish-Israeli relations, as well as Israeli Jewish lobby's attitude to Turkey. But I will finish in 2 sentences. As I mentioned at the beginning, everything is mixed up. The terms are mixed up. For instance, whenever Turkey starts to talk about Israeli expansion and Israeli breach of law in the Middle East, then the label of anti-Semitism comes. Even the State Department spokesperson made an announcement that Turkish government has very anti-Semitic approach or anti-Semitic announcements. There is nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And this is a huge apparatus to suppress any kind of criticism about Israel. Whenever you criticize Israeli anti-Palestinian approach or Israeli expansionism, then you are labeled as an anti-Semitic. How come? As you mentioned, Turkey is the only country in the region who welcomed Jews escaping from German Nazism in the Second World War in 1940s. Even Britain did not give them visas to go Palestine. It was Turkey. Turkish ambassadors, Turkish diplomats, they issued passports to Jews in Rhodes, in France. We remember their names: Selahattin Ülkümen, Namık Yolga, and they were prized by Israeli state. They were given, their grandsons were given the prize of Gentile for this time. And it was Turkey who welcomed, and there is nothing to do with anti-Semitism and being a critic of Israeli policies in the region. So we should not mix up this to each other. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Çağrı Bey. Herbert, also now the Israeli head of state, Benjamin Netanyahu, he called former US President Donald Trump the greatest friend Israel ever had. Now, we know Netanyahu had a very rocky relationship with Barack Obama. And it looks like his relationship with Biden, well, maybe not the best friend Israel ever had, but maybe on speed dial somewhere lower down the list. Now, how do you view the developments in Jerusalem, in Gaza, from an American perspective, foreign policy perspective, and how that could play out in the US relationship with Turkey as well?
Thank you very much for the question. I think we have to reset our analysis across the board. We're always looking at this from state centricism. So this is about the role of religion in foreign policy. This is about what the earlier governments of the United States avoided to do. And that is to speak clearly with our friends, our allies. This spills over into historical disparageness because special interest groups like to spin it the way they are best for their interest groups. Basically, what we are observing with the Biden administration and its relationship with Turkey, as well as with Netanyahu, the government, the cabinet at this moment, is a watershed. It's a watershed where international law plays an important role. But behind international law, and there's no more difference between domestic and foreign policy in American public policy. That's an end. Those days are coming to a new dimension. Two reasons: cultural revolution and a fourth industrial revolution. People are polarized in Turkey and in the United States. Behind international law stands the word justice. And it's the Halkbank, if it's genocide, if it's Feta Gulen, it's about justice and the rule of law. So everybody says Feta Gulen is, X, Y, and Z. Bring me the evidence, according to the treaties between the United States and Turkey, the evidence. And again, I'm coming back to what I said in the first round. It's about courts. It's about jurisprudence. It's understanding the symbiotic meaning between law and history, about justice and injustice of the past. And politicians are not removed to say what you can do for me today and tomorrow. They have constituents who are deeply evangelical, deeply religious rooted people. They're not the Einsteins. They just want to live a good life according to their understanding of God and country. Basics. So these are the representatives and not the cliches that have been formed in the last hour here. It's about the structural dynamics of where United States President Biden, diplomatically and back channels, but openly said, your days are up in Netanyahu, unless you begin to bring an end to this horrific killing of civilians. And remember, there is a political wing in the Democratic Party today who has a major influence on domestic policy, the changing of how government's role exists or is transforming the economy of infrastructure and empowering the role of government to lead the country out of this recession or out of this miserable pandemic into a challenging economy that it will face with China.
Herbert, I want to cut you off and follow up with a question to something that you said. You were talking about Fethullah Gülen and you said, bring me the evidence. Now, I follow his actions in the US very, very closely, and we see multiple FBI raids on his charter schools. We see multiple allegations of playing around with US taxpayer money. Now, if I remember correctly, someone who's trying to get residence in the United States, these type of allegations alone for any private citizen would be more than enough to have him expelled from the United States, not allow for his residency to continue, A. And we also need to realize that on his green card, and this is not conspiracy theory, anyone who wants to fill out a Freedom of Information Act can get this information as well, that there are members of the Central Intelligence Agency who signed his residency papers, who signed his green card applications. Now, when we think about a man who has about a third grade education, a so-called imam from Turkey applying for a green card in the United States, it's hard enough to get any type of American citizen to help out, let alone have members of the intelligence community vouch for such a man. So I think it's very understandable that when Turks view this relationship and view his asylum in the United States with some form of conspiratorial aura going on, because this is not normal. I think we can both agree that this is not normal. We can both agree that a man who does not speak a word of English, who does not have any type of major scientific education, opening up hundreds of charter schools, I believe 200, more than 200 now just in the US alone. So it does look like an invisible hand is protecting him, is shielding him. And again, I don't want to talk from a conspiratorial standpoint, but I do want to lay some facts out here. And this does create a perception, a very realistic perception. So I don't feel the rule of law is being employed on Mr. Gülen's asylum in the United States, his residency, because if he was an average citizen, if he was just someone else there, most likely his residency would have been revoked for all these allegations. After all, the FBI does not storm a charter school without any reason. There must be some type of evidence if they're walking in. Am I wrong? And how would you like to answer my question on this one, please? Very, very interested in this.
You know, that is exactly how investigations are made, because there are observations that lead to suspicion that there is something wrong. But the point is, in these treaties, and I remind you, this is law. This is not just some kind of, executive order. This is law of the land. These are treaties. And that means that the rule of law that with all of the suspicions, all of the investigations, the evidentiary process, and this is the legal threshold. You bring me not hearsay. You don't bring me some kind of by association. You bring me really evidence, and you got a one-way ticket.
Well, it seems that Turkey has provided a lot of evidence. I don't have access. I have not viewed the evidence myself, but I do know there was a lot of evidence provided to the United States regarding his extradition requests. And I do know that lawyers are working very, very actively for that. And also the Brunson case in Turkey, there was a lot of American pressure during that ongoing case. At the end of the day, he was convicted and allowed out on time served, but that doesn't change the fact that there was a direct intervention of the US government in an ongoing case, that as well. But I don't want to get into, I'm not trying to put you in, I find this very interesting. That's why I want to engage you on this as well.
I just want to comment, because this is exactly what we're talking about. So until last year, jurists, that means Turkish students acquiring a degree in law, they didn't even have to pass a bar exam. Like in the United States, you have to pass a bar exam to practice law. So you have to look at the legal systems, the legal structures, the jurists themselves and their understanding of law, international criminal law, which is, again, a very important part of this discussion. And if you want to put down evidence, and this is also a responsibility of the government of the United States to review this, because it's a treaty, which means it is domestic law of the United States. If somebody wants to file special interests because it's a security issue for America, X, Y, and Z, that's legitimate, but it has to be a part of the filing. It has to be part of the rule of law because it's a treaty. You bring me the evidence and the government has to respond according to the treaty. So again, in the Bronson case, you have hearsay, which is accepted as evidence. That has been witnessed by people who have been there at the court. Hearsay, except for the Holocaust and the International Military Tribunal, because of nobody being alive, there were hearsay statements that then had to be verified. But in a court of law, it's not hearsay. Regardless of it's Turkey or if it's regardless of this, the jurists know that is not acceptable. And yet, that is the problem that we have in the Bronson case.
I think we're gonna, just for the sake of moving on, I'm gonna have to say the one thing we agree on is that we disagree with each other, but I do want to move on. And before I get to Richard, I want to ask Bassam a question because depending on Bassam's answer and how he answers it, I might want to follow up with what you have to say, Richard. Now, Bassam, one of the things that you said was Syria is divided. You also said that the US only supports the Kurds in Syria. Does the United States want to see a divided Syria? Is that what they want going forward? And if that's what they want, how is Turkey going to take a position against a divided Syria? Because we see that Turkey constantly talks about the territorial integrity of Syria being its #1 foreign policy priority in that country. Obviously, any type of fracture in any type of neighboring country in Turkey is always seen as a national security threat to itself also. So what does the US want if it's just supporting the Kurds and it's Syria is divided right now?
Look, it's so many different questions, different dimensions. The bigger question, I don't think anybody knows, except including the Americans, what they want from Syria. Just 100%. So I don't think they have policy or strategy towards Syria. It's something is just moving day by day. They're reactive to the events on the ground, rather than they have their own vision on Syria. Syria doesn't mean much to the American. Historically, it's never been part of American policy or strategy or anything. They're dealing with PKK, PYD. It's very dangerous in the sense that the American army, they create a model in the region where they can fight a terrorist group using local groups. And that, for our bad luck, they choose wrong part, which is PKK. But for them, they want to protect that model so they can apply maybe in Afghanistan where they withdraw, maybe in Somalia, maybe in other parts of the world. So for them, PKK is more like military model rather than political model. And that's why all the US officials, they were very clear that we never promised the Kurds any political status, zero. I mean, from Obama till Biden. Yet they have to protect that military model by protecting a social safety network, the Kurds, and that will create complicated problems when you talk about Northeast Syria. The Kurds, the best estimate, they are 600,000 to 700,000 Kurds. The Arabs in the same region, they are the lowest estimate is 2 million. So the Arabs, they feel the Kurds are occupation power supported by the United States. That formula will not protect that model. Today, it's protected today, tomorrow, but I'm sure 6 months or 2 years from now, this model will collapse. The Kurds cannot tolerate that model, and the American forces cannot stay in that occupation model. The counter argument on that the same Arabs who hate the Kurds and they say they're occupation power, the alternative is Iran, which is terrible. Nobody wants Iran. Russia, nobody trusts the Russian. The regime is the worst scenario. So they are living with their pains with that model that they have, American PKK, PYD model. How long that will stay? For me personally, I don't think this long-term staying. Turkey will not accept it. The suffering of the people is increasing, and so on and so forth. So we don't know what the American wants. This administration, they talk about human rights, which is good. They talk about humanitarian aid, which is good. They don't talk much about they have interest to go involved in political solution. They are far away. They keep it to the regional powers that give Turkey upper hand or leading role to play in that part. Again, what I mentioned before, that Syria today is divided. the state as a state is disintegrated anymore. It's become militia, warlords. One of them Bashar al-Assad, one of them Jolani, one of them Kobani. This is what is Syria basically. That model is threat for national security of Turkey. If not today, for tomorrow. If not tomorrow, after whatever time. It will be used against Turkey, or it just be a model that you have failing state next to your country. And since the Americans are not interested, that Turkey could play more role, take more risk, more high risk to do something for Syria and for Syrian. And people, Syrian in general, most of them, they highly appreciate Turkey. I mean, so you are not playing with the enemy feelings. We are not playing with Iran. The Syrians don't see Turkey as an Iran or as Russia or as regime. So Turkey have a lot of people who supported any initiative Turkey can do, even it will not be fair enough for the Syrian. So they have something to do, big things to do. They need a risk. They need just to go forward. Again, the Iranian-American deal will give Turkey a big wall to come to the Arab world again with different attitudes. Before, Turkey was perceived as just supporting Muslim Brotherhood. If I will advise Turkish government, please be Turkey. Don't be Muslim Brotherhood. Keep these two separate again each other. Try to correct that perceptions, because that will get Turkey to play with Egypt, with Saudi Arabia and GCC, not only in Syria, in Palestine, in the Mediterranean, in Libya. And that will give Turkey more leverage on the US and the EU. US is the superpower. There's no way any country to fight superpower. At the same time, to go to the superpower, to put your condition on it as a Turkey or perception, it doesn't work. They will listen, it doesn't work. It's a relation, as all the speakers say, it's really bad at need times. During that time, Turkey should invest somewhere else to re-empower itself. Not re-empower itself, just to work with the surrounding country around it. Again, it's Arab worlds, mainly Arab worlds, Muslim worlds, which help Turkey to work with EU and United States.
Okay, thank you, Bassem. And it does look like Turkey is trying to reconcile its relationship with Egypt, and it is.
Inshallah, we hope.
And Saudi Arabia a little slower, but there's also some advancing on that front as well, as both sides try to thaw their relationship out. Now, Bassem touched on a couple of themes that I want to forward these questions to you. Now, one of the things that he talked about is the proxy model, and the YPG being the backbone of that proxy model under the SDF umbrella. Now, the US was very successful in Iraq against Al-Qaeda, using Sunni fighters to be able to infiltrate Al-Qaeda in the past, and it had quite a lot of success in that arena in dismantling Al-Qaeda. Now, when the US first tried to develop and cultivate a proxy in Syria, there was Operation Timber Sycamore, CIA operation to train moderate Syrian opposition against the regime, against ISIS. And America scrapped that very, very quickly. And many of those fighters who were trained under that program over the years have ended up forming the backbone of the Syrian National Army, a group that's incredibly successful against Assad, incredibly successful against ISIS as well. And one of the criticisms that we hear against Turkey is regarding ISIS, but when in reality, no country has taken more land away from ISIS than Turkey. No country has killed more ISIS fighters than Turkey, more than 3,000 with Operation Euphrates Shield. Now, I want to ask, why did the US scrap a successful policy in Iraq for a brand new policy in Syria? Why did it change it? So why did it not go with Sunni fighters against ISIS as it did? I mean, it was a proven track record against Al-Qaeda. It could have been just as successful in Syria against ISIS. Why did they choose a organization that is a national security threat to Turkey? And also, I want to talk about the UN report that came out just 2-3 days ago, the YPG now being the #2 biggest employer of child soldiers, according to the United Nations. right after Al-Qaeda affiliate Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. So we talk about human rights a lot. Human rights very important to Biden. Child soldier recruitment, a massive human right violation, probably one of the greatest human right violations you can, forcing children to fight. So a lot of questions, Richard, and we're going to close it out after this. You have a lot on your plate right now. I'm sorry I hit you with so many.
I'll try to be concise then. I think the roots to the answer to your first question lie in your second question, right? So the second question, you noted that YPG, and according to the UN report, has the second most child soldiers, and the HTS the first. That in a nutshell is the problem, is that when you look at Syria, there's bad and then there's worse. And the problem I recall very clearly in 2013 and 2014, when the program you referred to was produced. Remember, at that time, the United States and Turkey had pretty similar views, and we had the Obama administration and President Erdogan's administration pushing one another to say, why don't you go in and solve this? No, why don't you go in and solve this? And both sides were trying to train with limited success the Sunnis who would go in. Now, the problem is that those that were the most competent fighters tended to be from very nationalistic and very religious groups. People that we would, call moderates per se, probably had, more education, a more liberal background, and were not the ones that were the sort of the people swinging the pipe, so to speak. So I think the problem is that the crux of this conversation took place in 2013 and 14 and 15. On one side, you had John McCain, may he rest in peace, and others who said, look, the regime is sort of on the ropes, and it is not, there's still enough of an opposition. It's not secure enough to resist if we all work together. So let's push more with these moderate groups, even the nationalist groups, some of the religious groups. And then there was another side of the argument that said, no, they're all bad. There is simply no good group, and we are not good enough as an American government to look at the different groups and factions that make up the opposition and to pick the ones that are not Al-Qaeda. Remember, this was a traumatic time for the United States because we had gone from the Obama team saying, this is the junior varsity, right? So this whole ISIS or Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Al-Qaeda in Syria, they're not a serious threat, to having American heads cut off in Syria and other places. So it was a dramatic change of atmosphere in the United States about this group, and the administration was under huge pressure to do something quick. So the combination of pressure to do something quick and the policy consensus in Washington being that we cannot tell the good from the bad Arabs, those that are too aligned to Al-Qaeda and those that are, and there was no tribal structure similar to what you had with the uprising in Iraq. So you mentioned that model had worked during the Sons of Iraq uprising in 2005, 6, 7. They didn't have a similar structure like that, at least not a strong enough one in the core areas where this fighting was going on that we could readily operationalize. And the other thing is, in Iraq, we were able to make those deals because we had thousands and thousands of troops there to provide arms and security. We had none of that in Syria in 2011, 2012, 2013. So the decision that was made, and just so you know, I was on the other side of the argument that said, don't do this. It's not worth it. The long-term cost will be too high. But the decision was made to take the group that was already fighting, regardless of their politics and regardless of their terror status. And I think there were people who either didn't know or pretended not to know that there was the linkages between the YPG and the PKK, because there's the least need to train them and equip them, and it'll be a quicker result. That's what you call a tactical expedient. Now, the art of the statesman is to look at the tactical expedient and the long-term strategic costs and to make the right call. Obviously, due to, if you look at my record of what I argued in 2013, 14, 15, all the way through, I don't think that we made the right call. So now we're stuck with this tactical expedient. As a great state, it's very difficult if you've used a proxy with all the problems that proxy brings to just throw them away. So now we have an extrication problem. I think, as Bassam said, that the United States has no long, deep-seated interest in staying. I don't think we're going to stay forever. I don't know if it's a year. I don't know if it's 3 years. I don't know when it happens, but we do have a problem because the group that we've built our position on for tactically expedient reasons is the least capable of ruling over either Northeast Syria or the entirety of the place. It's a minority within a minority, a radical minority ideologically within a group that's also a demographic minority. So I don't think it's a sustainable position. I do hope that we find a way that militates towards stability in that region. I'm still a believer in 2254 and a negotiated solution. But if you look at us picking up and getting out of Afghanistan, a place we've sort of committed far more in terms of blood and treasure, it's hard to think that we'll be long for the position in Syria.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. You guys gave very, very good answers, very, very insightful views. I mean, I personally enjoyed it. I hope everyone watching enjoyed it as well. Thank you very much, Chad Adhan, Rector at Altenbusch University, Richard Utsen, a retired colonel and private consultant, Bassam Barandi, former Syrian diplomat, Herbert Regenbogen, professor and fellow at Catholic University, and Ali Çınar, chairman of Turkish Heritage Organization. And I also want to thank Mustafa Aydin for providing this wonderful platform, chairman of Istanbul Aydin University. And everyone watching at home, thanks for watching us. I hope we were able to give you some insight on the US-Turkey relationship and how it's trying to adapt and deal with the recent developments in the region. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Eyvallah.
Eyvallah.
Görüşmek üzere.
Görüşmek üzere. Take care, Herbert.